The great halls of the alien empire were filled with glowing light, tall pillars made of shining crystal, and the echo of thousands of voices. The day was important, the day of the royal hatching. The emperor himself stood on the golden throne, his eyes sharp, his crown burning like fire. He waited as the egg of his bloodline cracked before the eyes of the court. Every noble, every general, and every servant leaned forward. They expected glory. They expected a mighty dragon child to emerge, one that would roar with fire and shake the walls of the palace. The emperor's children were meant to be born strong, meant to show the future power of the throne. But when the egg broke, silence fell. From the shell came not a warrior, not a monster of strength, but a small and trembling hatchling. Its scales were dull instead of shining, its wings soft and weak. It looked around with wide, frightened eyes, and instead of fire, it gave a weak cough. The crowd gasped. Some laughed quietly, others looked away in shame. The emperor's face darkened, his jaw tightened. He stepped forward and glared at the tiny creature, his own son, his own heir. But instead of pride, he felt anger. He raised his hand and declared before all, "Worthless? This hatchling is worthless." His voice carried like thunder, shaking the halls. The court erupted with whispers. Nobles whispered to each other. Soldiers smirked. Even the servants dared to laugh softly. The word spread like fire, worthless. The child of the emperor was worthless. The emperor turned away, disgust in his eyes. He left the hatchling on the cold floor of the crystal hall. The small creature looked at his father, his eyes filled with sadness. He did not understand why he was hated. He only knew the sting of rejection. The laughter of the court cut deep into his heart. He curled into himself, tiny wings wrapping around his weak body. He wanted to vanish. He wanted to hide from the world. But the world did not hide from him. Day after day he grew in the shadow of shame. Other hatchlings of noble houses trained with fire and steel. They grew strong and proud. Their roars shook the skies, but he could barely lift his wings. When he tried to roar, only a broken squeak came out. The young nobles mocked him. They threw stones. They spat the word worthless again and again. The emperor avoided his gaze. The empress pitied him but could not protect him. The palace became a cage of humiliation, and the child began to believe the word. He began to whisper it to himself. Worthless, perhaps they were right. Perhaps he was nothing, yet fate is strange. The empire stretched across stars. Conquering worlds among their slaves were humans, fragile creatures taken from Earth after a failed rebellion. They were weak compared to alien warriors, their bodies small, their skills unimportant. The aliens saw them as tools, nothing more. One day, the young hatchling wandered into the lower halls of the palace. He walked past guards who ignored him, past servants who laughed at him, and there in a quiet chamber, he saw something strange, a man, a human, standing with simple tools in his hand, scissors, combs, cloth. He was cutting the hair of an alien noble. His movements were calm, careful. Each snip of the scissors was sharp, precise. His eyes were steady. The hatchling watched from the shadows. His heart beat with curiosity. Here was a creature weaker than himself, smaller than himself, and yet the human's hands did not shake. The human's eyes did not look away in fear. He worked with quiet strength, strength the hatchling had never seen before. After the noble left, the hatchling stepped closer. The human turned, surprised but not afraid. He bowed slightly. "Do you need something, young one?" he asked. His voice was gentle. The hatchling blinked. No one had ever spoken to him kindly. No one had called him young one without mockery. "I am worthless," the hatchling whispered. His voice cracked. The word felt heavy, heavier than stone. The human frowned. "Who told you that?" he asked. The hatchling lowered his eyes. "Everyone," he whispered. The human knelt down so his eyes met the hatchling's. "Then they are blind," he said softly. "You are not worthless, you are only untrained. A blade left in the dust will look dull, but if sharpened, it can cut through steel." The hatchling's heart trembled. Was it possible? Could it be true? The human smiled. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "I will show you something, not fire, not swords." But something different. The hatchling tilted his head, confused. But for the first time a spark of hope lit inside his chest. He left the chamber with small steps. The voices of laughter still echoed in the palace halls. But now deep inside another voice whispered, The words of the strange human barber, a voice that said maybe, just maybe. Worthless was not his name, and so began a secret path. A path that would shake the empire. A path no one could expect. The day the hatchling met the human barber, the stars themselves began to shift. The empire did not know it yet, but history had just changed. The human barber lived in the lower halls of the alien palace, a place filled with shadows and silence. He was not a warrior, he was not a scientist. He was not a noble with shining armor or golden crowns. He was only a man with scissors, combs, and a cloth to the aliens. He was nothing more than a servant, an earthling kept alive because some nobles liked their hair trimmed. Yet to the young hatchling, the barber was a mystery. The boy had seen strength measured in fire, claws, and blood. He had seen greatness defined by roars and battles. But here stood a man with steady hands and calm eyes, working as if every strand of hair was a secret mission. He was weak by alien standards, yet when he moved his hands, the room obeyed his rhythm. There was no fear in him, no shame. The hatchling returned the next day, walking quietly through the corridors where servants whispered and laughed at him. Why does the worthless one go there? They mocked, but he ignored them. His small heart was too curious. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and there was the barber, sitting on a wooden stool, sharpening his scissors slowly. "You came," the barber said with a small smile. His voice was calm, warm like fire on a cold night. The hatchling lowered his head. "You said you would show me something," he whispered. The barber nodded. "Yes, but you must trust me." The hatchling tilted his head. "How?" "I am weak," he said. The barber leaned forward. "Weakness is not always a curse. Sometimes it hides what others cannot see. Let me show you." He placed the scissors in his hand and snapped them in the air. Snip, snip, the sound was sharp but gentle. The hatchling flinched. "That is nothing," he muttered. The barber chuckled softly. "It may look like nothing, but every cut is a choice, every cut is control. If I lose focus, the hair is ruined. If I lose patience, the hand bleeds, even in this small art. There is power." He placed a comb in the hatchling's claws. "Try," he said. The young dragon's claws trembled. He dragged the comb through the barber's hair, slow and awkward. His wings twitched. His heart raced. "I will fail," he whispered. The barber's eyes softened. "Then fail and fail again. Until you do not," the hatchling stared. His father had never spoken to him like that. Nobles had only shouted or mocked, but this human, he spoke as if mistakes were not shame, but steps. The hatchling tried again, and again, each time the comb moved smoother. His breathing slowed, his claws steadied. Something inside him began to change. For days, the hatchling returned. Sometimes he combed, sometimes he watched. The barber showed him how to hold scissors, how to move with patience, how to breathe evenly. The lessons seemed small, almost silly, but in those moments the hatchling felt peace. For the first time, he felt control over his trembling body. One evening, the barber looked at him and said, "You see, young one, strength is not only in claws and fire. It is in calmness, it is in focus. A man who can steady his hand with a blade this small can steady his heart against any storm." The hatchling's eyes widened. He felt the truth in those words, but outside the quiet room, the empire still called him worthless. In the grand halls, he was mocked during training. He was pushed aside. The emperor never looked at him with pride. Yet secretly, the hatchling carried new strength. He would sit quietly when others screamed. He would breathe slowly when others panicked. He remembered the barber's voice. "Steady your hands, steady your heart." One night, as he walked through the garden of glowing trees, a group of noble hatchlings blocked his path. They circled him, their wings sharp, their laughter cruel. "The worthless one plays with his pet human," they sneered. "Does the human cut your scales like hair?" They pushed him to the ground. His claws dug into the soil, rage boiled in his chest, but instead of lashing out blindly, he remembered the barber's lessons. He inhaled slowly, his body stilled. His eyes locked onto theirs with new fire. "Move," he said quietly. His voice was calm, steady, different. The other hatchlings froze for a moment. The weakness in his eyes was gone, the trembling was gone. They felt something new, something unsettling. They spat at him and left, but their laughter was thinner. The hatchling stood, his heart racing. His hand still shook, but less than before. He whispered to himself, "Not worthless, not worthless." The barber was waiting when he returned. He saw the dirt, the scratches. He did not ask questions, he simply nodded. "You are learning," he said. The hatchling blinked. "Learning what?" he asked. The barber smiled. Learning how not to be broken. The palace still laughed. The emperor still ignored. But a seed had been planted in secret halls. Under the guidance of a simple human barber, the worthless hatchling was becoming something new, something unseen and in the shadows of the empire. Whispers were starting, quiet, uncertain whispers. They said the worthless child no longer looked so worthless. They wondered what had changed. They did not yet know the answer. But soon the entire empire would. The hatchling began to visit the human barber every night. When the palace was quiet and the stars hung over the empire like watchful eyes, no guards cared where the worthless one wandered. They thought he was too weak to matter. That blindness gave him freedom. The barber always welcomed him with the same calm smile. "Sit," he would say, and the hatchling would obey. Sometimes the barber placed a comb in his claws. Sometimes the scissors, sometimes only a small mirror. The lessons were never loud, never harsh. They were gentle, patient, slow. At first, the hatchling thought it was strange. What could combing hair or holding still teach him? He wanted fire, he wanted wings, he wanted to roar. Yet the barber never raised his voice, never spoke of power the way nobles did. Instead, he spoke of breath, of patience, of focus. "Close your eyes," the barber said one night. "Breathe with me in, out, slow, steady. Hear the sound of the scissors, snip, snip. Let it guide you." The hatchling obeyed. He listened. His trembling claws grew calmer. The pounding in his chest softened. He felt control, something he had never felt before. Soon, each lesson became more than grooming. When the barber guided the comb through strands of hair, he taught the hatchling about control. Do not rush. Every line must be even. When he showed him how to clean the blades, he spoke of discipline. Care for your tools.
"And they will never fail you." When he cut hair in silence,
He taught the value of stillness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength preparing to speak. The hatchling began to change. His wings still looked weak, his roar still small. But his heart was growing. His eyes grew sharper, his steps more steady. He no longer curled into himself when others laughed. He began to walk with quiet dignity. One night, as the barber trimmed the hair of a noble, the hatchling watched closely. The noble was proud and cruel. He shifted impatiently. He mocked the human under his breath. Yet the barber did not react. His hands remained steady, his movements perfect. He finished the cut with grace, bowed politely, and left. "Why did you not strike him?" the hatchling asked when the noble was gone. "He insulted you." The barber smiled softly. "Because insult cannot wound me. Only my own anger can. He wanted me to stumble. I gave him nothing." The hatchling's eyes widened. He felt those words burn deep inside. For so long he had let insults define him. Now he saw another way. The days in the palace still brought humiliation. The emperor still called him worthless. The nobles still laughed. But slowly something in the air began to shift. The hatchling did not cry when mocked. He did not lash out when pushed. He only looked at his tormentors with calm eyes. Eyes that made them uneasy. They did not understand. How could the weakest child stare at them with such strength? The barber began to tell him stories of Earth, stories of people who had no claws, no fire, no wings, yet built cities, fought wars, and dreamed of stars. He spoke of warriors who used discipline more than muscle, of healers who saved with patience, of barbers who became trusted guardians of secrets. The hatchling listened with wide eyes. He had never heard of such strength. It was not the strength of fire, but the strength of spirit. One night, the barber placed a pair of scissors into the hatchling's claws and said, "Cut my hair." The hatchling froze. His wings twitched nervously. "I cannot. I will ruin it." The barber's voice was calm. "Then ruin it and learn. Trust your hand. Trust your breath." The hatchling raised the scissors. His claws shook. He cut awkwardly, unevenly. Snip, snip. The hair fell in clumsy tufts. He winced. "I failed," he whispered. But the barber looked into the mirror and smiled. "No," you began. Beginning is always the hardest cut. For weeks they repeated the exercise. Each time the hatchling grew steadier, his breathing smoother, his claws calmer, until one day, the cut was straight, clean, sharp. He stared at it. His heart racing. He had done something right. For the first time he felt pride. Outside the secret lessons, the palace noticed changes. Servants whispered that the worthless hatchling no longer hid in the shadows. Guards muttered that he walked like a prince, not a beggar. Nobles frowned when his eyes no longer showed fear. But quiet fire the Emperor noticed too. He watched from the throne as his son entered the hall. His wings still small, but his steps steady. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. Something was different, but he could not see what. He dismissed it with a scoff. Worthless remains worthless, he told himself. But deep inside the young hatchling, something powerful was growing. A strength no alien swordmaster had taught. A strength born from patience, discipline, and human wisdom. The bond between the barber and the hatchling grew stronger. Not of master and servant. Not of teacher and student, but of something deeper. The hatchling found in the barber what he had never found in his father. A guide who believed in him. A voice that lifted him. And while the empire still laughed, while the emperor still scorned, the child who was once called worthless was slowly sharpening into a blade the empire would one day fear. A blade forged not of fire but of quiet lessons in the hands of a human barber. The palace began to whisper. Whispers always spread faster than fire. Servants carried them through kitchens and gardens. Nobles carried them through halls of crystal. Even soldiers muttered them during training. The whispers all spoke of the same thing. The worthless hatchling no longer looked so worthless. He walked with steadier steps, his eyes no longer hid in shame. His voice, though quiet, carried strange calmness. It unsettled those who had mocked him all his life. Some said he was cursed. Others said he was hiding power. None knew the truth. The emperor sat on his throne, cold and sharp like carved stone. He watched his son during a council gathering. The boy stood among other hatchlings of noble houses. Their wings strong, their fire loud, yet the emperor's eyes narrowed not at them, but at his own child. Something had changed. The boy was not powerful, not yet, but there was something in the way he looked back at the world. A stillness that was dangerous. What has touched him? The emperor asked his closest general. The general bowed. Nothing, my lord. He is still weak, but the emperor did not believe it. He had ruled too long to trust whispers of nothing. His gaze followed the boy, sharp as a blade. The nobles began to grow suspicious as well. They noticed the boy often vanished at night. They noticed he no longer flinched at their insults. One noble sneered. He walks like he carries a secret, another replied. Then we must find it. The court's suspicion fell upon the human barber. A man too calm, too steady. A man who spoke little but whose presence carried quiet weight. Servants claimed they had seen the hatchling enter his chamber again and again. Guards reported the boy spent hours with the barber, doing strange things with scissors and combs. To the nobles, this was laughable. To the emperor, it was troubling. One evening during a feast, the emperor called for the human barber. The court filled with laughter as the small man stepped forward. His clothes were plain, his tools hanging at his side. He bowed low. You summoned me, my lord. The emperor's eyes were like fire. They say my son spends his nights with you. His voice echoed across the hall. Tell me, human, what do you teach him? The barber's heart beat fast, but his face showed no fear. I cut hair, my lord, he said simply. The nobles roared with laughter. Yes, the emperor said coldly. You cut hair, yet my son walks differently. His eyes burn differently. Do not lie to me. What poison do you feed him? The hatchling, sitting at the edge of the hall, trembled. He wanted to speak, but his throat was tight. The court leaned forward, waiting to see if the barber would be executed. Guards gripped their spears, but the barber only bowed again. I feed him no poison, my lord. I give him no blade. No fire. I only cut, comb, and speak, if that has changed him. Perhaps the change was already within. The emperor's eyes narrowed. The answer was clever, too clever for a slave. He waved his hand. Leave, he said, though suspicion remained in his gaze. After the feast, nobles gathered in private. This is dangerous, one hissed. If the worthless one grows strong, our houses will suffer, another sneered. We should end it before it grows. Plans were whispered in shadows. Knives were sharpened, guards were bribed, but the hatchling was no longer blind. He could feel the stares that followed him. He could hear the venom in the whispers. When he returned to the barber, he spoke in a low voice. They will harm you. They think you are my secret. His claws dug into the stone floor, fear burning in his chest. The barber looked at him calmly. Do not fear for me, young one. Fear only for yourself. For when they strike, it is not me they will aim at. It is you. The hatchling's eyes widened. Then what should I do? He whispered. The barber placed a hand on his shoulder. Do what you have learned. Breathe, focus, endure. A storm is coming, but storms pass, and those who stand steady remain. The next day, as the hatchling walked through the training grounds, 3 older noble hatchlings stepped into his path. Their eyes burned with envy and cruelty. Worthless, one spat. "Show us what your human has given you." They shoved him, waiting for him to fall, waiting for him to tremble like before. But he did not. He breathed. He steadied his claws. He looked at them with calm fire. For a moment they hesitated. Something in his gaze unsettled them. They struck him, claws scratching his scales. He stumbled but did not cry out. He stood again, quiet as stone. The others laughed nervously. Their fun was ruined. They left with anger boiling in their throats. From the shadows, spies of the Emperor watched. They carried the tale back to the throne. "He did not fight, but he did not break," they whispered. The Emperor sat in silence, his eyes dark. Something dangerous was taking root in his son. Something no noble training had ever given. That night the Emperor looked at the stars, his mind heavy. "Perhaps worthless is not so worthless after all," he muttered to himself. But instead of pride, he felt a strange chill. For a son who learns strength in secret is a son who might one day rise against the throne. And so the court's suspicion deepened. Shadows thickened, knives sharpened. The Empire held its breath, for the boy once mocked as worthless was no longer a joke. He was a question the court could not answer. The season of trials arrived. The palace burned with golden banners. Drums shook the air. Nobles filled the high crystal seats, and the Emperor's throne towered over all. This was the day when young heirs of noble blood would face the trial of fire, a test that separated the weak from the strong, the worthy from the forgotten. The hatchling stood among them, his wings still small, his body still frail compared to the others. The crowd sneered. "He will not last a breath," one whispered. "The worthless will be ashes before he takes a step." Another laughed. Even the Emperor leaned back on his throne, certain that this trial would silence all rumors of change. The trial of fire was simple but deadly. Each heir must walk through the sacred flame. It was no ordinary fire, it was dragon flame, alive and hungry, passed down by the ancestors. To walk through it was to prove control over fear. To fail was to die or crawl out in shame. No hatchling had ever survived without true strength. The line of heirs began, one by one. Strong young dragons entered the fire. They screamed, they roared, they stumbled, some passed with burns. Others crawled out in tears. The court cheered or mocked as each fate was sealed. Then came the turn of the Emperor's son, the one called Worthless. The drums stopped. Silence fell like a blade. All eyes turned to the small figure stepping toward the flames. His steps were steady, but his heart pounded like thunder. He remembered the laughter, the stones, the whispers. Worthless, 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 the word had been chained to him all his life. Now the chain dragged behind him as he faced the fire. The Emperor's eyes were cold. Let this end today, he thought. He expected ashes, nothing more. But in the crowd, hidden from all, the barber whispered to himself, "Breathe, young one, remember, breathe." The hatchling stepped before the wall of flame. The heat scorched his scales. The fire seemed to roar with voices of hate. His legs trembled, his wings shook for a moment. The chain of worthlessness felt too heavy. His claws dug into the stone. "I cannot," he whispered to himself. But then from deep inside he heard another voice. A human voice, calm as water. "Steady your hands, steady your heart, focus, do not rush. Do not fear." The hatchling closed his eyes. He inhaled slow and deep. The flames crackled, but his heart slowed. His claws stopped shaking. He opened his eyes again. And the fire no longer seemed to laugh. It only waited. He took the first step. The heat clawed at his skin, but he kept breathing, in out steady. He remembered the scissors, the comb, the lessons of patience. His claws moved forward one by one. The crowd gasped. "He does not scream," someone whispered. The nobles leaned forward. "He walks as if the fire is nothing, step after step." The flames wrapped around him, licking his wings, burning his scales. But his eyes never closed, his breath never broke. He walked like the barber had taught him, calm and steady, as if each step was a cut of the scissors, precise and sharp. The Emperor rose from his throne, his face hard. He had expected fear, he had expected collapse. But his son walked with the dignity of a prince. Each step was an insult to his doubt. Each breath a defiance of his judgment. At last, the hatchling stepped out of the fire. Smoke rose from his body. Burns marked his scales. But he stood tall, he did not collapse. He did not scream, he only breathed steady and calm. The crowd fell silent. The laughter was gone, replaced by shock. The nobles whispered in fear. Impossible. He should have burned. How did he endure? This cannot be the same worthless child. The emperor's jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, but no words came. His son had walked the fire with more strength than heirs twice his size. The hatchling turned his gaze upward. His eyes met his father's. For the first time, he did not look away. The emperor felt a strange chill in his chest. It was not pride, it was something heavier. The shadow of doubt. The court sat frozen. The silence heavier than the flames themselves. Then slowly the whispers began to shift. Perhaps he is chosen. Perhaps the worthless one carries something greater. Perhaps we were wrong. The hatchling walked past them, his legs weak, his body aching. But his spirit unbroken, he did not smile. He did not boast, he simply breathed as the barber had taught him. Calm, steady, and control, far in the back. The barber watched quietly. His heart swelled, but he made no sound. He only whispered, "Well done, young one," for he knew this was only the beginning. The trial had not proven the hatchling's strength. It had proven his spirit, and a spirit like that could move empires. But in the shadows of the palace, danger thickened. The nobles who feared him now feared more. The emperor who doubted now felt unease. The boy who was meant to die had walked through fire and lived, and the empire could never see him the same again. The empire did not sleep after the trial of fire. The flames had died, but the memory of the hatchling walking through them still burned in every mind. In the crystal halls, nobles gathered in secret, their voices sharp as knives. "He should have perished," one hissed. "The worthless was meant to be ashes, not a symbol." Another slammed his claw against the table. "If he rises, our houses fall." The emperor sat alone on his throne, the weight of doubt pressing on him like a mountain. He had declared his son worthless. He had allowed the court to laugh. But now the boy had stood in fire and lived, not with brute strength, but with something colder, quieter. He could not name it, but it unsettled him. Whispers of prophecy stirred among the people. Old scrolls spoke of a weak heir who would walk through flames untouched, a sign that the empire itself would change. Priests muttered prayers. Merchants spoke rumors. Even slaves whispered with hope. And every whisper carried the same question. Was the prophecy unfolding before their eyes? But the hatchling did not care for prophecy. He only returned to the lower halls, to the quiet chamber where the barber waited. The barber looked at him with calm pride. "You walked the fire," he said. The hatchling bowed his head. "I did not do it alone." The barber shook his head. "No, you did it with your own breath. Your own heart. I only gave you the mirror. You found the strength. From then on, the lessons grew deeper. The barber no longer taught only combing and cutting. He taught the rhythm of steps, the balance of claws, the discipline of silence. In the small chamber they moved together, not like master and servant, but like two souls sharpening each other. The hatchling learned to control his wings. Not with rage, but with patience, he learned to steady his fire. Not with pride, but with focus. "You are becoming more than they expect," the barber said one night. "But remember, power is not for pride, it is for choice. One day you will choose between empire and truth, and you must stand steady when that day comes." The hatchling listened. His young heart trembling, he did not yet understand. But the words sank into his bones. Meanwhile, storms brewed beyond the palace walls. Rival houses feared the emperor's son might one day claim the throne. Assassins were whispered into the dark. Spies trailed his steps. Poison found its way into his meals, yet each time danger came, the hatchling endured, not with brute force, but with the calmness the barber had carved into him. When poison burned his throat, he slowed his breath until it passed. When assassins struck, he steadied his claws and moved with precision. The emperor noticed. He watched his son's survival with a frown. "It should not be possible," he muttered, but deep inside, pride warred with fear. Pride for his blood, fear for his throne. The people of the empire began to whisper differently. No longer worthless, but resilient. No longer shame, but strange strength. Children in the streets played at being the prince who walked through fire. Slaves looked at him with hope. Nobles looked at him with dread. The hatchling grew, his wings still smaller than others. His fire not the strongest, but his spirit glowed like steel in sunlight. And always at his side in secret shadows was the barber, guiding with words sharper than any blade. But one night, as the moon burned red, the barber grew silent. The hatchling noticed. "Why do you not teach tonight?" he asked. The barber looked at him with eyes heavy with knowledge. "Because your next lesson will not come from me," he whispered. "It will come from war." The hatchling's chest tightened. "War?" The barber nodded slowly. "The nobles will not wait. They fear you. They will rise against the emperor, against you. The storm is coming, and it will test everything you have learned." In the days that followed, the signs of war grew clearer. Ships moved in secret, soldiers trained in shadows, spies whispered of blades being sharpened. The empire stood on the edge of fire. The hatchling walked through the palace with steady breath. His claws no longer shook, his eyes no longer lowered. He remembered every lesson, every word. He was not the trembling child from the egg. He was something else now, something waiting. And in the heart of the empire, the storm finally began to break. Nobles raised banners of rebellion. Armies clashed in the skies. Fire and steel rained across worlds. And in the middle of it all stood the boy once called worthless, with a human barber by his side. The empire was about to learn that patience could be sharper than fire, that discipline could be stronger than claws, and that the weakest hatchling could become the storm itself. The empire shook with war, skies filled with burning ships, planets burned with rebellion. Noble houses that once bowed to the emperor now raised their banners against him. They feared the prophecy. They feared the son who had walked through fire and lived. They feared that the word worthless had turned into something far more dangerous. The young hatchling stood on the balcony of the palace. His small wings spread against the smoke-filled horizon. Soldiers roared below, fire lit the air. For the first time, he was not trembling. For the first time, he was not hiding. He breathed slow, steady as the barber had taught him. The emperor sat on his throne, fury burning in his eyes. "They come for us," he growled. "They come for me, for you, for everything." He looked at his son, the boy he had once cursed, and his voice dropped. "If you are truly more than worthless, prove it now." The palace shook as rebel ships landed. Warriors stormed the halls. Their blades shone, their wings thundered. The nobles shouted, "Kill the emperor, kill the boy, burn the human." The hatchling's heart pounded. But he remembered every lesson. He stepped forward. His claws steady, his eyes calm. His roar was not the loudest, but it cut through fear. Soldiers rallied to him, drawn by something strange, his courage. Battle erupted. Fire clashed with fire. Steel clashed with scale. The young hatchling fought not with blind rage, but with precision. Every move like the snip of scissors, clean, controlled. Where others screamed, he breathed. Where others stumbled, he stood. He was small, but he was steady. But in the chaos, a greater danger emerged. From the shadows walked the leader of the rebellion, a towering alien noble draped in black armor. His fire burned blue, hotter than any other. He sneered at the hatchling. "You? The prophecy child? You are nothing. I will end this with one strike." His blade rose. Glowing with flame, the hatchling braced. But before the blow could fall, a figure stepped between them. The barber, plain and small. No armor, no claws, only scissors in his hand. The court gasped. "A human?" The rebel laughed. "You bring a barber against me? This is your champion?" But the barber did not flinch. His eyes were calm, his hand steady. He twirled the scissors once, and snip, snip. The sound cut sharper than steel. The rebel snarled and swung, his blade fast as lightning. But the barber moved with patience, with rhythm. His scissors flashed, catching the strike at its weakest point. The blade snapped. The court froze. The hatchling's eyes widened. The rebels gasped. The barber stepped forward. Each movement precise, each step as calm as his lessons. The rebel swung again, fire roaring, but the barber slipped past. Steady breath, steady hand, and with a final snip. The noble's banner of black armor fell apart. Sliced clean, he stood exposed, humiliated, defeated not by claws, not by fire, but by a pair of human scissors. The hall erupted in shock. The empire stared. The emperor's mouth hung open. His son's eyes shone with awe. The barber lowered his hand. "Power is not always in size," he said quietly. "Sometimes it is in control." The rebels faltered. Soldiers of the empire roared. Inspired by the sight, they pushed forward. The rebellion broke like glass. Their leader fled in shame. The palace stood, bloodied but unbroken. And in the heart of it all stood a human barber and the hatchling once called worthless. Silence followed the battle, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. The emperor stepped down from his throne. His eyes locked on his son. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice broke through, low and heavy. Perhaps I was wrong. He looked at the barber, the strange human who had stunned an empire. Perhaps Worthless was never my son. Perhaps it was me, the court bowed. Not to the emperor, but to the boy and his teacher. The whispers of prophecy turned into shouts. The hatchling was no longer the shame of the empire. He was its hope, and at his side the barber became legend. The human who had shown that even the smallest skill, the simplest craft, could turn the tide of destiny. From that day forward, no one in the empire dared to laugh at Scissors. No one dared to call the boy worthless, for they had seen with their own eyes how patience had defeated pride, how calm had destroyed fire, and how a human barber had stunned the empire. And in the quiet that followed, the hatchling breathed, calm and steady, ready for the future, for he knew now that he was not worthless. He was something greater, forged by fire, sharpened by patience, and guided by a man who had shown the empire that true strength sometimes wears the face of the ordinary.